Hey everybody, long time no see. Mrs. Stowe here, coming at you with our very first confirmation retreat, which is called the Matthias Project, Becoming the 12th Apostle. And you might be wondering, who is Matthias? Why is this called the Matthias Project? Isn't this confirmation? And hopefully by the end of this session, you have an idea of why we call our confirmation program the Matthias Project and what that ultimately will mean for you as a confirmation candidate making your confirmation either in June or in the spring or fall, whenever Bishop Koluk decides of next year. So let's get into this. All right, so before we talk about who Matthias was, we need to talk about the fact that there was a need to replace an apostle. So when Judas died, after he betrayed Jesus, there had to be someone set as his replacement, and Peter took that up. And don't forget that apostles were different from just the disciples. Disciples were a student, they would listen to the teachers. So Jesus, over his time, had amassed quite a number of disciples, people that followed him, that listened to him. This is why he was seen as such a threat. So the apostles were people that were set forth to send the message. So we think of those as Jesus's nearest and dearest, the ones that were closest to him, that were entrusted with what he taught them, so that they can then go forth and teach it to others. So keep in mind through all of this that apostle is more of a messenger than a student, is the one actually talking about, teaching about, preaching the word. Now, when Peter was undertaking this finding a new apostle situation that he came up with two requirements for the person that was going to fulfill this role. And the third was actually was made by the people. So the people actually came up with it, they prayed over it, and this was a third requirement that they came up with as a people. So, one of the requirements was that the candidate was required to be someone who followed Jesus during his entire earthly ministry, beginning from his baptism until he ascended into heaven. So, seeing him through from the time he was baptized by John to the time where he was crucified and ascended into heaven. The second requirement for the 12th apostle was that it was required that they saw and interacted with Jesus after he was crucified and resurrected. So, for someone to be a 12th apostle, they had to have made contact in some way or seen Jesus after his crucifixion and his resurrection. And the third, which was prayerfully decided upon, was that the candidate needed to have been appointed by the Lord Jesus himself. Now, you might be wondering, Mrs. Stowe, but Jesus was in heaven, he ascended. How did they possibly have Jesus appoint the successor to Judas? And how this was often done was by casting lots, aka rolling dice, okay, by taking a chance. And it was believed, and it was actually quite customary in those days, that it would fall in the favor of the person that had favor with God. So when they rolled, it would ultimately fall to the person that God favored to take over that role of the 12th apostle after Judas. So just a little background information. As Peter was trying to figure all of this out, the two requirements: had to know Jesus throughout his entire ministry, had to have had some kind of interaction with Jesus after his resurrection, and then must be appointed by God, so must win the casting of lots. So it actually came up to two people. It came up to Joseph Barsabbas, also known as Justus, and Matthias. And those were the two candidates that came forward that met the two requirements of having participated with Jesus in his ministry on earth and were there and participated or saw him in some way after his resurrection. So the third portion of this, for the third requirement, was that dice roll, that casting of lots. And the lots fell to Matthias. And Matthias was ultimately the one who was selected to be the 12th apostle.